13 minutes.
I'll start the contribution by saying that I absolutely agree with the points raised by Deputy O'Riordan and the need to tackle that within our schools and within our employment equality. And I have known teaching colleagues during my career who have not felt that they could be open about their own identity, and it's absolutely something that needs to be addressed. I will join with everybody else in the House in wishing people a happy Pride Week, and if Deputy Donnelly suggests that the weather mightn't play ball and the dress code might be raincoats and wellies, well, at least there may be rainbows, is the only thing. We've had a little bit of happy history made in Waterford. We've had the Pride of the Dacia Festival in Waterford for many years, and Minister O'Gorman met with members of the committee last year. But we've had our first ever Pride event in Dungarvan in West Waterford just last weekend. So that's a happy bit of history to have. And I suppose in reflecting and preparing today's speech, I was thinking back on another bit of happy history, which is the general election of 2020, February of 2020. And Minister O'Gorman, who's just left, and we were elected just a couple of hours apart. And we both responded in almost exactly the same way. We didn't do any of the whooping and hollering, and there was no hoisting on shoulders or anything like that. But we did what came naturally to us as a response. We turned to the person who had most supported us, who had walked the long road with us. We turned to our partners and we kissed them. Most natural thing in the world to do at a time of great happiness. And in my case, completely unremarkable and completely unremarked upon. And in Minister O'Gorman's case, it was much remarked on, because I turned and kissed a woman and Minister O'Gorman turned and kissed a man. So as we hear statements on LGBTI+ and equality today during Pride Month, we should remember that while Pride has become much more mainstream, that Pride is a protest. And it's a protest that reminds us that despite all the progress made, there's still much more to do. If I walk down the street and I reach out to take my wife's hand, I don't have to think about it. That's just a simple act of affection. It's not a statement. It's not a protest. And until people within our LGBTI+ community feel that same freedom, that means we still have a road to travel. And it reminds us too that progress cannot be taken for granted, that it has to be protected, because while we've made progress, significant progress in our lifetimes, in the last decade even, and we're rightly proud of those steps, we're rightly proud of all those conversations, all that empathy that culminated in our historic result of the marriage equality referendum. Both history and the international context shows us that freedoms won can be freedoms lost unless they're protected and defended. And we've talked about the regression and the retrograde steps that we've seen both in Poland and Hungary on LGBTI+ rights in recent times. And we've commented already on the violence we've seen against people in that community that seems to be on the rise everywhere. In the US and the UK, many countries across Europe, and we're not immune to it ourselves, as witnessed in the vicious murder of 2 men in Sligo just earlier this year. And something that worries me and concerns me is that we're beginning also to see an importation of culture wars that are being waged elsewhere, where debates around these issues are becoming weaponised and they're being used to stoke fears and to sow division. The debate around trans rights has become increasingly heated in Ireland over the last few weeks, and as many of the previous contributors have said, it's a debate around somebody's basic right to exist. And we always have to be conscious about that. And it seems that the highly divisive and destructive battle lines drawn in the UK on this issue have been imported to Ireland, despite the fact that the laws protecting trans rights have been in place for 7 years now, and to my mind have had no ill effects on anybody. Trans people are like everybody else. They're like myself. They just want to live their lives and to be left alone. They don't need to hear their right to exist debated in divisive terms. So let's not go down that incredibly divisive and needlessly cruel path as we've seen in the UK. And let's remain focused on facts over panic, and never forget that there are real people at the heart of these debates, real people listening to the radio or watching the television, having the way that they live their lives discussed and picked apart. If these conversations need to be had, and if there are genuine concerns that people need to express, then this should be done at all times with empathy and with understanding. And the Government has been very active in this space, and Minister spoke to many of the initiatives being undertaken, and I'll mention just some. So the Government will be bringing forward a new hate crime bill. Ireland will also opt into the proposed EU hate speech ban. My colleague Catherine Martin is bringing forward an online safety bill which aims to tackle abuses online. Minister Helen McEntee has also enacted laws that make the sharing of intimate images with intent to cause harm a criminal offence. These protections, of course, protect us all, but we must recognise the need to protect members of our LGBTI+ community who experience many forms of discrimination, institutionalised prejudice, social exclusion and related harassments, bullying, violence and health issues and mental health issues. A key pillar of the national LGBTI inclusion strategy that the Minister referred to is to ensure that members of the LGBTI+ community feel safe and supported within Irish society. That's what we need, all members of our society to feel safe and supported in the same way. Minister O'Gorman and his department continues to do tremendous work. A major review of the equality legislation is underway to specifically outlaw discrimination based on gender identity. His department is working on an operating policy to guide the experience of LGBTI plus refugees going through the process of the international protection application. Earlier this year, his department commissioned an extensive study of older members of that community in Ireland to help identify needs, strengths and challenges that they still experience. And this will help inform ongoing implementation of the current and future national LGBTI+ inclusion strategy. This week's announcement of LGBTI community services funding by the Minister is extremely welcome. €900,000 being made available to groups operating at local and national level to support the community and non-government organisations with the aim to promote inclusion, protect the rights and to improve the well-being of LGBTI+ people all over Ireland. And there's a new additional element in the funding round which will enable LGBTI+ NGOs to plan to undertake longer-term initiatives to help maintain their support, and this is the core support feature that the Minister referred to in his opening statement. Very much welcome as well as the work being undertaken by An Garda Síochána to deepen awareness of this issue among their frontline officers. Actions contained within the national LGBTI+ strategy also aim to increase the capacity of An Garda Síochána to respond to the needs of victims of hate crime and to improve understanding of the community within the force. A new organisational approach to Garda diversity training is in the final stages of development and will be delivered throughout 2022 and includes online hate crime training, the online diversity and cultural awareness. The training programme was developed in conjunction with community representatives, including LGBT Ireland and Transgender Equality Network Ireland. And this has provided, I think, a really welcome opportunity for diverse groups and minority groups to have really meaningful engagement with this Garda training, so ensuring that the policing that we have within our communities really does answer to the needs of all peoples within our communities. Garda diversity officers are now located in every Garda division throughout the country and are trained, developed and supported to actively work with diverse and minority communities. Last year there was a full review of the GDO network which resulted in revising the role to include responsibility to facilitate the reporting, recording, investigation and prosecuting of hate crime. It also included supports for victims of hate crime by identifying their particular needs and acting as a liaison with necessary external support services as a responsibility. And that's just a flavour of some of the work that's happening and is underway. And Minister O'Gorman outlined much more that's happening. And all of this is necessary work and important work. And while that work is underway, and I believe this government is ambitious and committed in terms of this agenda, in terms of LGBTI+ rights, but while there's a need for this work to be done, that shows us that there's a need for pride, that there's a need for this Pride Festival, not just as a moment of joy across our communities, and it has certainly become that, and it's most welcome that has developed to become a joyous occasion, but also to remember that pride is a protest, and that it is still important that members of that community make their voice heard, and to keep the pressure on government and all members of the House here to deliver on what we want in terms of a republic and all members of that republic experiencing the same freedoms. Because I've never had to consider it, right? I'm cis male, it's of course part of my identity, but that's not something I have to fight for. It's not something I ever need to overly consider. I'm straight as well, that's also part of my identity. I don't have to think about it. It's not something that crosses my mind as I reach out to take my wife's hand as we walk down the street. And until every member of our society feels that same freedom to do as I do, feels that same comfort within their own identity, within their own skin, regardless of race, ethnicity, orientation, or identity, that tells us that pride is necessary, that it's something that it's an agenda we have to push forward, that we should absolutely be donning the raincoats and the wellies if that's what the dress code is required for the weekend, and that all of us should be coming out and supporting those members who are marching and have marched for many years to make those necessary changes within our society that makes our society a better place. Gur maith agat a cathaoirleach.